Hello, my friends. My name is Ryan Freeman, and you are watching another book review. Today I have a very special book. This is something that you have probably heard of before. It is one of the most famous novels from the 19th century. It was published in 1880 by an Eastern European. Can you guess what it is? It is Dostoevsky. It's hard to see. This is a very special print. This was part of the Great Book series where the University of Chicago, in collaboration with the Encyclopedia Britannica, put out the 100 most important books for a person to understand Western culture. And this book by Dostoevsky, and the title of the book is The Brothers Karamazov. Karamazov. Forgive my mispronunciation. I am not an expert. This is the first Russian book that I've read. I have predominantly read American, English, and German, and a little French authors. This is the first Russian author. The Brothers Karamazov is one of the books that I have been recommended to read from one of my good friends. It's been recommended by Jordan Peterson, a very popular intellectual today. I've heard nothing but great things about Dostoevsky. Some of my favorite authors, such as D.H. Lawrence, had very good things to say about Dostoevsky. So I knew that I would get around to reading him, but this book has literally sat on my shelf for the past 3.5 years, neglected. And finally, I picked it up and decided to read it. Now, why did I neglect it? Well, I'll say that I was somewhat intimidated. Whenever I hear Russian words, Russian names, it's a bit more challenging for me to remember and pronounce. I knew it was going to be a very heavy hitter. I had heard that it is filled with deep psychological conflict that can rip apart your soul in the process of reading it. No, I mean that in a good way. You know, one of the reasons I do like reading very insightful novels where the author delves into the soul of man is that it gives you a lot of reflection on your own life and the lives of the people around you. It helps you understand the world. What a good novel does is it is of course a great way to pass the time. It is a great way to escape from the mundane. It is a great way to learn about other parts of the world and be entertained. But it also sort of casts light onto the human predicament. And the brothers Karamazov is no exception. I was so surprised by how much I enjoyed it. The characters are so interesting. The very first character is this landowner, and I'm not going to spoil too much, but this landowner who is absolutely despicable, but hilarious. He's like a clown. So I found myself, of course, sort of disgusted with how he was a proprietor of his business, how he treated his servants, how he treated the people in his village, and how he treated his children. But there were some redeeming qualities in the guy, particularly just how funny he could be. He had 3 sons, and these 3 sons are 3 of the main characters, all of them very different. The oldest is an impetuous, sort of dishonored military man who is filled with passion. He's honorable in a certain way, and his honor is very important to him, but he transgresses his honor in various ways in the novel. And so a lot of his part is him dealing with this conflict inside of him. His passions are pushing him to seize women, to seize money, to throw men off their seat, and he's a very violent and tempestuous character, but you can tell he has a good soul. He has a good heart, and he's a good brother. And as a lover, hard to say. Is a good lover someone who is 100% faithful to their betrothed, or is it someone who is faithful to their heart? And I think Dmitri, the oldest brother that I'm talking about, this sort of strong, broad-shouldered, dishonored soldier, sort of had some problems in his military career, has a lot of problems with his childhood, who walks with yard strides. I mean, the author really describes the way that he comes into a room and the impression that he makes on everyone. He's a hero, but sort of a tortured hero, and he really gets put through the crucible in this novel, although largely of his own fault. He's reckless, and with his reckless, passionate side, he's so fun to read, but you're also shaking your head at Dmitri. The next oldest brother, so the middle brother, his name is Ivan. He is the quintessential intellectual, the guy who believes wholeheartedly in logic and reason, and really prides himself on his cleverness. He's one of the more mysterious characters, and I'll just say that he has a meeting with the devil that gave me goosebumps. It was very, very scary, very convincing. I don't know if you believe in the devil, but reading that chapter with Ivan and the devil was very, very fun and scary. And the third brother, the youngest, is the main hero of the story, I would say, Alyosha. Alyosha is a pure-hearted man. He is training to become a monk, and then he goes into the world, and he is the quintessential Christ-like figure, I would say, where he sacrifices his own interests, always for the betterment of other people. He's trying to save other people, although he never comes off as sort of a spiritually proud man. There's very little pride in him. He's got such great characteristics, and when I found myself very moved whenever I read a passage with Alyosha, whenever I read his story, because he sort of is, I believe, our ideal of how we should live. If everyone followed Alyosha's ways, if everyone had Alyosha's temperament, if everyone had his intuition, which is his strongest attribute. I mean, he's intelligent, but he's very intuitive. He just can figure things out and people out very quickly. But if everyone acted like Alyosha, what a world we would have. And he's having this. There's a lot about morality and the influence that we have on other people. There's people who have this corrupting influence on others. The environment is brought in, sort of the new ideas that were perhaps going through Russia at that time. At least in the novel, it talks about these new ideas of how the environment can corrupt people, how it's not their fault. You have these nature and nurture, these people, the Karamazov, sorry, I keep mispronouncing it. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. Do forgive me. Karamazov blood, which has this duality of great heroism, but also just sunken scoundrel-like debauchery. So it has this nature element where it talks about the different people's tempers and their humors, all of the various characters. There's a lot more characters. I won't get into all of them. But it also talks about the nurture side, the way that these children were mishandled in their youth, perhaps led them upon this path that the novel takes us through, a lot of tragedy, but I'm not going to say it's a wholly tragic novel. There is a lot of tragedy. There is a lot of heartbreak. There is a lot of, you might be moved to tears, but there's a lot of laughter. There's just beauty. I don't know if Russian people are this way, or in the 1800s were that way. I've met a lot of Russian people in my life, and I've always found them to be fascinating. I've had Russian students who could be very polite to their teacher, but then the most gregarious and funny students in a class. I don't want to make a generality, but Dostoevsky, in the Brothers Karamazov, does make a lot of generalities about Russia, about the Russian temper. So I think if you are interested in what a Russian what the Russian temper might be. And right now, Russia's kind of big in the news. I won't get into politics, but I think the Brothers Karamazov will give you at least a taste of what Dostoevsky thought the Russian temper was, at least when he wrote this in 1880, when it was published. It is a murder mystery. I'm not going to say who was murdered or how they were murdered and what happened to the murderer, but it is a murder mystery. I loved it, you know. So if you like mysteries and puzzling through clues, it's a lot of fun. The hardest part reading this, I would say, it wasn't the vocabulary. There were not a lot of difficult vocabulary words. There were some French phrases, which in the footnotes had the translation. There were not so many deep concepts. There were some theological ideas that, if you're familiar with the Judeo-Christian beliefs, will give you some very insight onto perhaps what you already know, good and evil, but everything I think that we can relate to: family, fatherhood, brotherhood, love, romance, what is marriage, to be a servant, different classes in a society. There's a lot of different topics here told through very interesting characters, but what I was going to say is the most difficult part could be, at least in the beginning, is keeping track of the names of the main characters. This wasn't such a big problem for me as I got going, but in the beginning I had to sort of flip back and forth because sometimes the author will use the first name of a character, then the last name of the character, and then sometimes use their nickname. And so I believe this is perhaps a Russian style of sobriquets and calling people, but referring to people, but which might turn you off, but actually, as you get to know the characters, knowing them by their nicknames as well as their full names is actually kind of nice. It actually makes them a little more endearing, and it's not actually that difficult once you get going. For female characters, I only named 4 male characters. There's a cast of female characters that will suit you. There's a very proud, spiritual woman who is Dmitri's betrothed. There is his lover, a very lusty, full-bodied, somewhat deceitful and jealous, but also incredible and very compelling character who Grushenka, who was one of my favorite characters. There's this older woman, this aristocrat she's a mess, and her daughter. I mean, there's a lot of great characters. That's one of the things that I found the most enjoyable about this book, The Brothers Karamazov, forgive me, is the characters. They're so varied. They're so great. There's one of the best characters was this child, Koila, I believe is his name, this 13-year-old boy who is very precocious and comes under the influence of Alyosha. But, oh my gosh, just the range and the cast of characters and some of the dialogue. You will be laughing, you will be moved, perhaps to tears, but you will be very happy that you read this if you're willing to go into it. You know, this doesn't look very thick, but the print, if you can see, is very small. So it is a very thick book, but one that I thoroughly enjoyed. I hope I didn't spoil the story, and I hope I didn't offend you by mispronouncing any of the names. This was the first Russian book I've read, the first book by Dostoevsky, but I promise you I will be reading more in the near future. Thank you for watching this book review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please click like, share, and subscribe. My name is Ryan. Bye-bye.